this tradition from Abruzzo does something really occult and miraculous here, if people buy in. I say that at the beginning of every single Panarda. This is all about you. And if you buy in, it's going to be an amazing experience.
This is Tante, Belle, Cose, a podcast where we'll explore the many beautiful things that Italy has to offer. In each episode, we'll dive into unique stories that will inspire your travels. I'll share expert travel advice, answer your questions, and introduce you to the people that make Italy so special. If you're looking to discover the real Italy, let these stories guide your next adventure. I'm your host, Danielle O'Terry. I'm a writer, art historian, and the founder of Feast Travel, Arthur Avenue Food Tours, and Cilento Food Tours. I love Italy so much that the fact that I am Italian-American just feels like an extra blessing that life has given me. Andiamo! I want to introduce you to my friends Frances Cradle and Cathy Lee. Together they own Virtù, a restaurant in South Philadelphia, which is really more of a story than a business. Google categorizes them as an Italian restaurant, but they would tell you it's an Abruzzese restaurant, dedicated to the food of the region of Abruzzo. Known for its monte e mare, which means mountains and sea, it's a region that receives very little international tourism. Italians go there for ski vacations and in the summer to its pristine coastline along the Adriatic. It's a gorgeous, beautiful place. And Abruzzo is also filled with tiny villages in the mountains. So many of them have become depopulated ever since the unification of Italy in 1861. And many Abruzzese people settled in Pennsylvania, including Frances's grandfather, who changed the family name from Cretarola to Cradle.
With an Abruzzese guy in my house who was passing away, my grandfather. He had emphysema. And he told me all these stories, but then I went off to college and I was doing other things. And then we moved to South Philadelphia. And suddenly I was surrounded by people who reminded me of my grandfather. And I kept thinking about the stories he would tell about Abruzzo and how I didn't know anything about it. Everything I knew was just secondhand
and sometimes not accurate.
Yeah. Like many of Philadelphia has a ton of people from, or whose origins are in Abruzzo. And they all have this diaspora memory of a place that was so incredibly poor. And Abruzzo, it struggles a bit, but it's an amazing place to go and a wonderful place to live.
Virtù is the result of an extended stay that Frances and Cathy had in 2001. Cathy had been working at the Philadelphia Art Museum, and Frances was a grant writer. Then they had a scary brush with cancer, and that led them to the decision that the future is not guaranteed. So they decided to pack up, rent their home in South Philly, and spend 6 months exploring Abruzzo.
First of all, the genius for living in the moment that Italians in general have, but especially we found in the rustic areas, you could allow everything to slow down. You could just be where you were and not be worried about what was going to happen, what happened, just happened, and what's going to happen in 5 minutes. So you could enjoy the moment. Also, the genuine community, the genuine conviviality that we found. And it's a stunningly beautiful place. It's national parks, there are wolves, there are bear, there are huge herds of sheep still, wild horses on the mountain. It's like dramatic to be there. It's, life-changing. And we had our 2 Jack Russell Terriers, and they were having the time of their lives. And then we came back, and we love Philly.
So when they returned, they were looking for ways to recreate the magic of Abruzzo in their normal, everyday lives in Philadelphia. And they got involved with a lot of different projects. They helped people with genealogical research, and then they began leading culinary tours of Abruzzo, which they did for about 5 years. They brought small groups over from the United States to explore all of the micro-cuisines and different parts of the region. So they just got to know it better and better. Frances continued studying Italian, and he really became a lay scholar of Abruzzo. He read dozens of books and learned everything that he could about its history and culture. And then one night, while out walking their dogs in South Philadelphia, Frances and Cathy saw a storefront that was for sale. And they got the idea that maybe they could open a restaurant. Now, it's important to know that at the time, neither Frances or Cathy had any restaurant experience.
It was actually the home of the Italian newspaper, which was just a very tiny free paper, and husband and wife lived upstairs in the apartment. They didn't need the space. And at that time, commercial properties were going for really for a song. So we thought this could be a really interesting property to do something with. We don't know what. We hadn't really formed it.
They'd never even been waiters. Now, if you've ever worked in a restaurant or read one of Anthony Bourdain's books or even watched The Bear, you know that their success, going on 17 years now, is the first miracle.
We started in October of 2007. We are completely unqualified to operate this business.
Really, everything you don't do. We're home cooked. Yeah.
We used to gather all our friends at our house in South Philadelphia every Friday, and I would cook, and most of them would sleep over. We would drink till the wee hours of the night. We would also spend a lot of time going to Abruzzo. And the irony is, opening a restaurant dedicated to Abruzzo meant that both those activities had to stop. East Passyunk eventually became a kind of acknowledged restaurant corridor. And it was the main thoroughfare for the Italian community for a long period of time. But it wasn't, a lot of places had closed, and a lot of places they were almost like hobbies. So for the people who ran them, they were open sometime, not all the time. So we opened to like the sound of one hand clapping, and that was for the best because it allowed us to make all the horrible, terrible mistakes that we made, not knowing anything other than Abruzzo. I also think, though, that it was just at least in my case, and maybe I'm guilty of some sort of form of abuse because I dragged her along for all of this, was that I missed terribly what I had found in Abruzzo. And I knew that I was living in a neighborhood that was a product of that diaspora, and that I saw a lot of the things that I think we've seen in almost every Italian-American neighborhood gradually just dissipating and dying a slow death. And I thought I wanted to bring something back, and I proffered it as a gift for what it was an act of incredible selfishness. I just wanted Abruzzo. I wanted Abruzzo somewhere, and we were like, we can make it or create our own little Abruzzo here, which is what we've tried to do, and not just with the menu, but with the spirit of the place and how we do things. Le Virtù means the virtues, and it is the name of a dish of minestrone that's made the 1st of May every year in the Termo part of Abruzzo. So everything that is left in the larder after the winter and everything that's coming up in the early spring is combined into a minestrone that's shared communally. And it used to be made by only the most virtuous girls in the town.
It's Maria.
Sorry. Oh, this is for our
talk to her.
Hello?
Maria is in charge of organizing a visit for the mayor of Villa Vallelonga, a small village in the heart of Abruzzo, to Philadelphia. La Panarda, a 40-course feast that Francis and Cathy started hosting at Le Virtù, is based on a tradition from Villa Vallelonga, and the local mayor has heard about it, and so he wants to meet them. As part of a visit that he's making to Toronto, where many descendants from his town live, he has also asked to make a very special stop to meet Francis and Cathy.
Panarda, it might be a tired thing, but I always call it an 8 to 9 hour exercise in Abruzzese lunacy. It's the Panarda in Villa Vallelonga begins at night and lasts through the night, and there are visitations by musicians and performers, but it lasts through the night, ends at dawn, and that's when the procession begins. So we're starting from a pretty intense tradition, right? Our Panarda starts at noon, and it's at least 40 dishes, usually about 8 to 10 wines. The first Panarda we ever did lasted, we had not figured it out. So it lasted 10 hours. We got that down to about 8.5 hours. In Abruzzo, all the dishes have a particular significance. They're usually traditional dishes, so a lot of lamb. In January, when this Panarda happens in Villa Vallelonga, that's the time when traditionally they would butcher the animals. So that's when these people would have access to their meat. So there's salumi, there's sausages, there's all sorts of things. There's a relative abundance, right? And that's part of the whole celebration. It's in a way, it's almost like it's shaking your fist at the general hardship that living in those mountains, that was part of everyday life. On that night, they're all going to eat well, they're all going to drink well.
Le Virtù has been celebrated for many reasons, most of all for its outstanding food. But La Panarda has become somewhat legendary. The writer Domenica Marchetti, who also has roots in Abruzzo, wrote about it for the Washington Post, and now it's a hot ticket.
It was hard sell at the beginning, but now they generally sell out in a matter of minutes to hours. It's usually completely sold out. Our Panarda, what we decided was we wanted to do a deep dive into Abruzzese food and into our mission and see who would come along with us. We shut down the whole restaurant, and it's only for 30 to 40 people. And you have to come and you have to commit to being here for the entirety of that time. And a Panarda takes you on a ride, and there's a sort of philosophy to a Panarda where you begin with light dishes, then a little bit of heaviness, then light again. So maybe some vegetables, then salumi, and then back into some grilled vegetables, and then into your pastas, and then a pause. And, I don't know how efficacious any of that is at a certain point when you're eating 40 dishes. Yeah, I see people hit the wall. I see people walk around. The last Panarda we did was just a few weeks ago. We held it in the summer. And people are walking around wondering why they made the decision to do what they're doing. But they always get pulled back in. It's been a small miracle. People buy into the experience completely. And that's what our Panarda has become about. It began as this exercise, and this is a really intense Abruzzese tradition. And I get geeked up about stuff like that, and I thought this would be great, and to bring it here. And wouldn't it be wonderful to pull it off?
We get a lot of repeat participants, which has been one of the greatest things. And a lot of those folks have asked us during the pandemic year if there was ever going to be another one.
Yeah.
We just said, yes, we can't say when because we do not know, but there will be another one. So it was really extraordinary this year to see the veterans, if you will, mentor a lot of the first timers through the course, through the experience.
And that's actually what the point I think is, it's really important. And I'd be interested that when we talk to the mayor tonight, whose Panarda is a very serious thing associated with San Antonio Abate. Our Panarda, although it's inspired by that, is really about community and conviviality because it's been miraculous. And I don't use that word lightly, that you have an 8-hour dinner in which nobody complains and everybody just has a wonderful time together, and people who do not know each other sit at a table. And obviously we could never have the kind of Panarda he has, or they've been having since 1657, because not everybody is Catholic. And people who come to us are from every faith and from every ethnic group. And it's been wonderful. I think for us, this last one, especially the kind of deep divisions that exist, that have become really just a daily part of living in the United States right now, to have that all just go away and have people sit there and laugh and sing. And we had a band, and they were traditional musicians from Calabria, from Latina, just outside of Rome, and the singer was from Napoli, and they performed for us. And so they were singing, and we did something extravagant. We had a frozen bear carved of
an ice sculpture of a bear.
An ice sculpture, because bears and wolves are typical in Abruzzo. We had a bear this year. We had a bear and a wolf the last time we'd done one. And it had a shot luge in it, and they were doing traditional digestivi from the shot. So there were components that are very American, but it was just great and intoxicating. And anybody can tell you that I'm not someone I'm usually a tough sell in terms of does joy exist, but actually it was very joyful, and I was very proud. And I'm actually looking forward seriously to talking to the mayor and telling him that it's pretty amazing that Abruzzo, this tradition from Abruzzo, does something really occult and miraculous here if people buy in.
There's always a lot of discussion about the Mediterranean diet, which originated in southern Italy, and how it's the one diet always proven by science to really truly be the best. And then there are tons of additional studies that try to decipher exactly which part of it is the thing. Is it the olive oil? Is it the rosemary? But the missing piece is what the Panarda is all about. It's eating together and being with other people. There are lots of bad food practices arriving in Italy today. There's too much sugar, processed food. They're putting hot dogs on their pizza. But culture is the ingredient that I believe keeps their rates of cancer and obesity much lower than the United States. And if it takes an annual Panarda, an 8-hour exercise in Abruzzese lunacy, like Frances says, to remember this, well, count me in.
We're giving the regular menu, and we're going to send out a few special things the chef is working on, but nothing extravagant. I mean, we're going to open up a bottle of Cerasuolo, which is a rosé made with Montepulciano grape. We'll try to pick a cantina near. The closest one we have is the town of Prezza, probably about a half an hour from Ville Vallelonga, so he should be familiar with it. And then we'll start talking and get to know each other. We'll, if I can say, shoot the merda, and hopefully find an affinity. I think we already have an affinity. It's not going to be a formal thing at all. I think he wants to have a genuine talk. And it's just pregnant with all these possibilities in terms of what we could potentially do. And it's very exciting for us. I think we're very honored to do this.
Now that the mayor's arrival is imminent, I can see that Frances is getting really excited. Kind of pokes at Cathy about the fact that she's going to be running the floor of the restaurant tonight. They should have put their manager on the schedule. But I can tell from her face and the look she gives me that she knows Frances is ready to geek out, and she's leaving him the space.
The Panarda is a very rare thing these days. So the Panarda was, the oldest Panarda is in Ville Vallelonga, which is in the hinterlands, and there are 19 families still pulling it off.
Most people, when they're planning a trip to Italy, just focus on Florence, Venice, and Rome. But there's a small percentage, maybe 20% of people, I'm one of them, you're probably one of them if you're listening to this, that would love to attend a Panarda. I mean, the absolute dream, right? Like going to an unspoiled place far off the tourist track and embedding there to have experiences that you could only have there in that one place. And so I wonder if the mayor's visit is about opening up this experience to more people.
These are questions I'm going to ask the mayor tonight. I think the mayor would like people to go there and experience what they have there, which is not going to be for everybody, but for the right people, it'll be exactly what they need.
You need an invitation. Yeah, it's not unlike what we need to do. It's not an advertised event through Eventbrite or something.
Oh, I'm so hopeful. We're definitely going to visit this summer. We're leaving in a couple days to spend some time at our house in Abruzzo, and we're going to stop by and get to know the mayor better and allow him to show us around the town. And part of the mission of this place has become, over time, the promotion of the region, just in general. And it's been a very kind of selfish thing for us, because a lot of what we find over there, and it's a region that experienced about 50% emigration. So you have a lot of small villages that are just stunningly beautiful in the most amazing natural circumstances, overlooking a gorge, but they're often very depopulated, and they need the right people to come. They need a kind of tourism that's of people who are going to understand and appreciate what's there and not expect something else, that are not going to expect to be taken care of the way you are in a 4-star hotel, but you'll be taken care of in a way that a 4-star hotel can never possibly take care of you. These people will show you genuine love and affection and generosity that will change your perspective on life, because that's what happened to us when we went over and stayed and just thought we'd stay for 6 months and then came back thinking this has to be part of our life. Has to be part of our life. So it's all up in the air, I think. And I think the mayor, who I've yet to meet, but I've seen some of the interviews he's done, I think he wants to encourage that. He wants to encourage people to come.
The mayor arrives. His name is Leonardo Lipa, and he's traveling with his cousin, Maria Ferrari, who's a native of Toronto, but her parents immigrated from Ville Vallelonga. Everyone sits down at the table together and begins chatting, and I can see from across the dining room that Frances is suddenly grinning from ear to ear. So I decide to pull up a chair just to listen in on the conversation, and it turns out that Frances has just received an invitation to attend the Panarda in Ville Vallelonga, and he is so happy.
It's amazing. I'm sorry. For me, totally amazing beyond.
The waiter starts putting down plates of the most beautiful, delicious things to eat. There are fava beans on toast, fried pizza, house-made salumi, zucchini with blistered cherry tomatoes, and this wooden board filled with amazing cheeses. And what I observe on the face of the mayor is what I often see on the faces of Italians when they are met with the affection that people from the diaspora have for their roots, that we really consider ourselves fruit of the same tree. They get a sort of hesitant curiosity. And there are some Italians that just don't get it. There are the ones that get really picky about how the food and the traditions have been adapted and how they're no longer authentic. I'm making air quotes here. And then sometimes Italians are just confused. They think, you're a citizen of the United States or Canada. These are important, influential, prosperous countries. Why do you care anymore about an impoverished little mountain village that your ancestors left behind 100 years ago? But I think the mayor is genuinely impressed with this beautiful experiment of recreating Abruzzo in Philadelphia that Francis and Cathy have continued to build. And so I decided to ask him the magic question. If tourists want to go to Villa Vallelonga for the Panarda, is it possible? His answer? Not really.
Però è troppo complicato, perché le famiglie che la fanno per dei motivi.
He explains to me in more detail that they tried to do something like this in the past, but it was too complicated. Troppo complicato. Because the families that carry on the tradition, they do it out of devotion, and they don't want to have to charge for it, which is something that you would definitely need to do if you're feeding 40 courses of food to complete strangers. But the mayor reassures me that if I should arrive, just call him and he will find a place for me. And if anybody else were to arrive in the town on the day of the Panarda, somebody would inevitably invite them to sit down at the table. A few weeks later, I had a phone call with Maria Ferrari because I wanted to hear once again her version of experiencing the Panarda in Villa Vallelonga. Now, she's born and bred in Canada, but she maintains the family home in the village and goes back every year. In fact, she makes sure to take off 7 vacation days from her job every January just to attend the Panarda, and lots of other people do the same thing. So this tiny mountain village of just 900 people swells. And I learned that the Panarda is just one small piece of a larger week. So there's a lot more going on for other people to participate in. It's a communal event for the entire village. It sounds similar to Carnevale, but she reinforces that it's not. It's their thing. It's their tradition, their devotion, and there's absolutely nothing else like it.
And the reason I say it's their festivity, they celebrate it within themselves, within the town, within their traditions. So when you go there, you are immersed. I go to become one of them.
This week is like a keyhole in the middle of the bitterly cold Abruzzese mountain winter. Everybody comes together to revel in mystery and hope for what God and the spring will deliver. There are bonfires, music, singing, dancing, and lots of food. There are many small villages throughout Abruzzo that have fire festivals, and they're all about music and storytelling and the life of St. Anthony Abbot, his miracles, and how he was taunted by the devil. And the devotion to St. Anthony is very real. He's the patron saint of domestic animals and also fire, but specifically the fire of the family hearth, whose embers burn all winter long. But the traditions around fire are even older than that. They go back thousands of years to when Abruzzo was home to tribes called Samnites and Oskins. They would have processions through the forests, and then they would stop at different altars that they made along the way and burn fires which served as offerings to their gods. In Villa Vallelonga, the week kicks off with a giant outdoor feast devoted to another saint, San Leuccio, and they make a type of polenta that's covered in a tomato ragu with the meat of pecora, which is sheep. Then on the nights of the 13th, 14th, and 15th, there's a street party every night, and it's always hosted by somebody different. There are giant cauldrons of food out on the street and open barrels of wine. The dishes include a lot of pork because this is also the time of the year when pigs are slaughtered and all of the salumi is made for the year ahead. You'll also find pasta and beans and spaghetti alla chitarra, which is a type of square-cut spaghetti that's cut with a tool that looks like the strings of a guitar. On one of the nights, the Alpini, the Italian Army Mountain Infantry, they host a dinner, and they're all wearing their signature green hats, punctuated by a long feather. And on the night of the 16th, it's the main event. it's time for the Panarda. And this is the night where you need an invitation from one of those 19 families who have been hosting a Panarda since 1657. The Panarda must have 40 items, not necessarily 40 courses like they do in Philadelphia. There are certainly standard dishes, but every family has their own recipes, and this alone is a piece of incredible culinary history. Also, once you've been invited by a family and you commit to them, you can't switch the next year. So nobody really knows what the other families are cooking. A Panarda can easily go on until 4 a.m. because nobody is allowed to leave until the musicians arrive. This is a group of men who go through the village and stop at every single one of the 19 homes. They're playing accordions and this Italian version of the bagpipes. And they sing songs that everybody knows so that they're sung together. And the songs tell stories about the life of St. Anthony Abbot. So maybe you get an hour or two of sleep because at 6 a.m., it's time for church. Everybody goes to Mass. And then after, a statue of St. Anthony Abbot is carried by a group of men outside the church, and there's a procession throughout the entire village. Imagine how cold it must be in the early morning. Maybe there's snow on the ground, and how beautiful this is. Maria explained to me that the key to why this tradition remains so strong in Villa Vallelonga is that kids are taught about the Panarda in school. They know that it's their inheritance and their responsibility to carry on. And young boys learn how to play the accordion or those bagpipes in preparation for when they grow up and are in charge of maintaining the tradition. So even if they eventually move to Rome or Milan, which so many young people from small villages often do, they know they need to come back for this special week. They want to. After the procession, finally, everybody gets to go home and have a little nap. But at 3 p.m., the parade for the children begins. And there are floats and giant papier-mâché masks and puppets, and they represent characters from folklore. And they also have the Smurfs and SpongeBob SquarePants. And all the children are wearing costumes. When the procession arrives in the piazza at sunset, the penultimate act is to burn all of the papier-mâché. And then after, the embers are scattered in the fields, so their sacred energy can bless the earth itself. Guess what's next? It's time to eat, of course. And there's one last giant communal feast where everybody in town gets together to eat amongst the bonfires. The piazza is filled with cauldrons of rigatoni, sausage, there's dancing, there's singing, all until the fires burn out.
That 1 week you're in this magical time period that it just takes you away. You forget that there's a reality. And they're so into it, Danielle. It's part of them. It's who they are. Nobody else can claim it the way they do it. It's very particular to them and the tradition of the families that started it back in the 1600s.
I asked Maria what the mayor thought of his visit to Les Virtù.
When they placed the dishes on the table, the deputy mayor was there, Vittoria Di Ponzio. Mm-hmm. She looked at that dish, she turned it over, and she said, I knew it. That ceramic is from Abruzzo. And she recognized that pattern, that way of a ceramic plate being made immediately, as soon as she saw it. One of the other things is when they put out the wooden board with the cheese on it, both Leonardo and Vittoria recognized the cheese.
And the very last thing I asked Maria was how the town dealt with not being able to have the Panarda because of COVID. They managed to have it in 2020, just before the virus broke out, but they missed 2021 and 2022. This break in the tradition must have been devastating.
The tradition did hold modified because a devotion is a devotion. So the family, the immediate family, the core family, still celebrated it because they were with each other. They just couldn't extend the invitation to the other people. But the family themselves still celebrated, so it never broke.
And so the magic and the miracle of La Panarda is that it reminds us we must make time to be together.
Say that at the beginning of every single Panarda. This is all about you. And if you buy in, it's going to be an amazing experience.
I hope you have enjoyed this first story episode of Tante, Belle, Cose. This is a brand new podcast dedicated to trip planning advice and beautiful stories that you won't find elsewhere in the travel media. So if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please hit the subscribe button. Now, if you would like to join our travel planning community, that's where you can talk to Francis and Cathy, find out more about their restaurant in Philadelphia, find out more about the fire festivals that happen every year in Abruzzo. You can join us by subscribing on Substack. It costs just $8 a month. And there's a running chat. I moderate all of the conversations. And if you need travel advice, just put your question there and I'm happy to answer. And you can share ideas collaboratively with the other members. Thank you so much for joining me.